Always by taking a look at the day's headlines. Mark your calendars. Pyongyang sometime in September. The two Koreas agree to hold a third summit between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the North Korean capital next month. South Korea and the world mark the International Memorial Day for Comfort Women, the victims of Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery. The now elderly survivors still await a heartfelt apology from Tokyo for the horrors they endured. Plus, Turkey in crisis mode. The Turkish lira keeps on tumbling despite the central bank's moves to shore up the country's financial system. The ripple effect spreads across Asia, sending markets into a tailspin. Only one place to start this morning, and that's the big news out of Monday's high-level inter-Korean talks. President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will be seeing each other again face-to-face, this time in Pyongyang. However, we don't know the date yet, only that it will happen in September. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee has our top story.
The next and third inter-Korean summit of this year will be held in September, though an exact date is not yet set. Meeting at the border village of Panmunjom on Monday, high-level delegations from Seoul and Pyongyang agreed South Korean President Moon Jae-in will be making his way up to the North Korean capital for the summit in September.
We're holding the summit in Pyongyang, so North Korea's circumstances need to be considered. We agree the summit needs to take place as soon as possible, but considering North Korea's schedule, we've initially decided to hold it in September and set the date through discussions. Realistically, it can't happen in August.
September is a busy month. The North Korean regime celebrates the 70th anniversary of its establishment on September 9th. Also, the UN General Assembly kicks off in New York in the latter half of the month. It's not clear whether the inter-Korean summit will come before, in between, or after these two events, but the nation's presidential office has ruled out early September because it could be hard for the regime to prepare for both its anniversary and the summit. But there seems to be another reason they couldn't agree on a specific date. Despite a seemingly warm and friendly atmosphere, North Korea had a sharp warning for South Korea.
It's very important that we quickly get rid of obstacles that hinder the improvement of inter-Korean relations. That'll be crucial to developing our ties and carrying things out according to schedule. If these issues are unresolved, then some unexpected problems could occur and our plans could face difficulties.
Speculation is that Pyongyang would have brought up the issue of sanctions during the meeting and urged Seoul to get more involved in alleviating them, and chose not to set a date to put pressure on Seoul. Overall, the two Koreas agreed that they've been quite successful in implementing the April summit agreement, citing progress seen in cooperation on railway and road connections, forestation, opening up a joint liaison office, and holding family reunions. But Monday's talks were far short of putting an official seal on the summit, unlike aimed. So in terms of results, it's still a bit vague. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the other big player in this is the United States, and the U.S. State Department says Washington and Seoul are in close contact over their joint response to North Korea after the two Koreas announced their plans for a third Moon-Kim summit in September. A State Department spokesperson told Yonhap News Agency on Monday that the improvement of relations between North and South Korea cannot advance separately from resolving North Korea's nuclear program. This comes as Washington continues to press Pyongyang to demonstrate its commitment to denuclearization, such as by declaring a full inventory of its nuclear arsenal. U.S. President Donald Trump has put pen to paper on a defense authorization bill that restricts any drawdown of American troops in South Korea. There had been concerns Trump might be tempted to slash the number of American troops on the peninsula as a cost-saving measure, but this bill prevents that happening. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
The John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act, which approved $716 billion for defense in fiscal year 2019, was recently passed by both chambers of Congress and was sent to President Trump on Monday to sign into law. At a ceremony at the U.S. Army's Fort Drum Base in New York, President Trump called the bill the most significant investment in the nation's military in modern history. The legislation notes that over 28,000 American troops are currently stationed in South Korea as a demonstration of the U.S. commitment to the bilateral alliance. And under a section describing the sense of Senate on U.S. military forces on the Korean Peninsula, it says their significant removal is a non-negotiable item as it relates to the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. In short, the defense bill restricts any drawdown of American troops in South Korea. A conference report accompanying the legislation notes that Congress also prohibits the use of the funds to reduce the troops' number below 22,000 without certification from the Secretary of Defense. The defense chief would also be required to certify that he has appropriately consulted with allies of the U.S., including South Korea and Japan, regarding such a reduction. The restriction comes as President Trump has repeatedly indicated his willingness to eventually pull American forces out of South Korea. Critics say such a move would play into the hands of North Korea and China, which wish to see U.S. troops removed from near their border. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, today marks the 6th anniversary of the International Memorial Day for Comfort Women, the term used to describe the victims of Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery. Most of them were from Asian nations and the majority were Korean. And from this year, South Korea is officially marking the day as an official Memorial Day as well. Ahn Jung-geun has more on the significance of the designation.
On this day 27 years ago, Kim Ok-sun, a Korean victim of the Japanese military's wartime sexual enslavement, testified about what happened to her, breaking a decades-long silence on the issue. And in 2012, the Asian Solidarity Conference for the issue of military sexual slavery by Japan, a group of victimized countries, including Korea, China, and the Philippines, designated the day as the International Memorial Day for Comfort Women. But it was only late last year that the Korean government officially designated August 14 as a Memorial Day for the Comfort Women. So this is the first time for the country to be commemorating the national anniversary.
This is just a beginning to make this the most meaningful National Memorial Day. I believe in unceasing efforts to restore the human rights of the victims by revealing the truth. We also have to teach a true history to prevent the recurrence of such a tragedy.
South Korea's designation of a Memorial Day for the Comfort Woman is in lockstep with the current administration's stance on the 2015 agreement between Seoul and Tokyo, in which Japan gave about $9 million to fund the foundation for the victims and to resolve the issue of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. But Seoul decided not to use the money, and just last month, the cabinet approved a government budget to replace the Japanese fund. The decision is in line with the Moon administration's conclusion that the 2015 deal failed to reflect the opinions of the victims. Experts, however, say that renegotiating the agreement might be unrealistic, but the dispute between the individual victims and the Japanese government needs to be settled.
Even though the agreement between the two countries was made, the victims still have the right to hold Japan legally accountable. There has been a lot of effort made in South Korea, but every time the case reaches Japan's Supreme Court, it gets thrown out.
Of the 240 registered victims in South Korea, only 28 women are still alive. And as their average age is over 90 years old, time is running out for them to receive what they call a heartfelt apology from Tokyo. Ahn Jung-geun, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea isn't the only country that suffered from Japan's wartime sexual slavery. A significant number of victims also came from other Asian countries, including China, the Philippines and East Timor, and even outside the continent, the Netherlands. And with the issue still unresolved, many international organizations are fighting in their own ways to demand that Japan issue a sincere apology. Lee Ji-won with the details.
As many as 410,000 women and girls around the world are estimated to have been kidnapped and forced to serve Japanese soldiers at military brothels during World War II. The victims have never received a sincere apology or legal compensation from the Japanese government, but various international organizations have been working together to try and settle the problem in their own ways and to prevent such horrendous acts from being repeated. One such organization is the Asian Solidarity Conference for the issue of military sexual slavery by Japan. There, around 10 countries meet to share the victims' testimonies and urge Japan to sincerely apologize.
We've been meeting since 1992 and have been carrying out a range of activities like helping countries set up comfort women statues. In 2000, the conference successfully opened the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal on the comfort woman issue in Japan, and it deemed Japan's late Emperor Hirohito and others guilty for their knowing participation in the crimes.
Another group works to remember this brutal chapter in history by having related documents registered in UNESCO's Memory of the World list. The documents include historical evidence, testimony, and paintings produced by the victims. The 8 victim countries submitted more than 2,700 records in 2016. But in a meeting last year, UNESCO postponed listing the documents on its register after a Japanese civic group submitted similar documents with a different interpretation. UNESCO said more discussions are needed between the two sides, but many see it as a scripted play.
The U.S. withdrew from UNESCO last year, and Japan, the next biggest donor, held back its payment, pressuring UNESCO to decide in favor of Tokyo. We even got testimony from expert panels that the Japanese government lobbied them to block this registry.
As for now, Han says that the international body has nominated a mediator for the talks it recommended and that details will soon be announced. The issue is still far from resolved and settling it won't be easy.
There hasn't been much progress in getting a sincere apology from Japan. This can be seen in the fact that they do not include this history in their textbooks. And with many of the victims over 90 years old now, more needs to be done for them.
But despite these setbacks, activists say they will continue to speak out.
This is not just a problem of history or of Japan's imperialism, but of human rights. We must remember the painful past and the efforts made to overcome the destruction of war. We have to teach correct history and make sure it does not happen again.
이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, in other news, the Bank of Korea has released its data on South Korea's export and import prices for last month. It showed both indexes are on the rise. Our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea's import prices increased for the 7th consecutive month in July due to the weakening Korean won. The Bank of Korea says the import price index rose 1.7% on month, recording 89.8 won in July, the highest monthly figure since November 2014. Compared to the same period last year, the index is up more than 12%. The local currency weakened against the US dollar, recording an average of 1,122.8 won last month, pushing up Korea's import prices despite a slight fall in global oil prices. In particular, intermediate goods prices increased more than 2% on month on rising coal and chemical goods prices. Without the change in the $1 exchange rate, the Bank of Korea says July's import prices would have ticked down 0.8% on month. Export prices rose 2.3% on month to 87.56. The central bank attributes the rising export prices to an increase in industrial goods prices, including metals and machinery. Export and import prices affect future consumer prices, so this could mean higher inflation in the months to come. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, amid widespread worries following the sudden capitulation of the Turkish lira, Asia's financial markets closed sharply lower on Monday as the shock rippled around the world, and Turkey's central bank has promised to increase cash liquidity in order to stabilize the market, but with the lira's value continuing to crash, whether it actually works remains to be seen. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
Turkey's central bank laid out measures on Monday aimed at calming the market after the Turkish lira went into a tailspin. It said it's ready to provide banks with all the liquidity they need. The central bank added it will cut the lira's reserve requirement ratio, a move that's expected to free up 10 billion lira, $6 billion, and gold liquidity worth $3 billion. The spreading financial uncertainties caused by the tumbling lira slammed Asian markets on Monday. Japan's Nikkei slid 2%, while South Korea's Kospi lost 1.5%, closing at a low not seen in 15 months. The lira was traded at an all-time low in the Asian market, and it drove global demand for the safe haven US dollar and Japanese yen. Although the lira crisis is expected to have a limited long-term impact on South Korea, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Kim Dong-yeon explained on Monday that Seoul is keeping a close eye on whether it spreads to other emerging economies. He also said the government will take necessary measures to stabilize the local market if exchange volatility reaches a certain point. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
A local BMW owner has testified to police about a fire that engulfed his car, one of dozens of similar incidents that have triggered a criminal probe into the local unit of the German auto giant. The questioning on Monday comes as Lee Kwang-dok, one of around 20 consumers who have filed a complaint against BMW Korea and its officials on negligence and other charges, appeared at the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency. The lawyer representing the plaintiff says he plans to lodge another joint litigation by 20 to 50 consumers and will submit more documents as evidence. Now, given the danger to public by these cars bursting into flames, South Korea's Transport Ministry says it's highly likely all BMW cars subject to recall will be banned from the road starting today. South Korea's Ministry of Patriot and Veteran Affairs revealed last week that it will inspect several sites in China related to Korea's independence movement to see how well they have been preserved. Hong Yu visited some sites in the city of Harbin to check it out for herself.
Harbin, a beautiful city located in northeastern China, is not only a popular tourist hotspot, it was also seen to the historic independence movement led in part by beloved Korean independence activist Ahn Jung-geun. Ahn was the hero who helped wrestle Korea's sovereignty back from Imperial Japan. The dark days of the early 1900s, when Korea was colonized by Imperial Japan, brought Ahn to Harbin with the purpose of murdering Ito Hirobumi, the Japanese supervisor of Korea, or Joseon as it was known at the time.
Harbin train station looks a little different today, but it was here in 1909 where Ahn shot Ito, a historic event for South Korea's struggle for independence from Imperial Japan.
The platform where it happened was preserved in remembrance of Ahn Jung-geun's bravery until 2015, but it's no longer there. Even the Ahn Jung-geun Memorial Museum that opened in the station in 2014 has been removed. The museum has been temporarily relocated inside Harbin Korean National Art Museum.
A lot of people visited the museum, especially South Koreans' interest in Ahn Jung-geun increased, and so the museum was able to let people know why he's such an important figure in our history. That's why we're trying our best to make sure the museum gets its place back when construction is complete.
But it remains to be seen whether the museum will get its place back. It will have to wait until reconstruction work is finished in 2020. Ahn stayed in Harbin for 11 days, and during that time he stayed in Kim Sung-baek's house, the leader of Joseon society residing in Harbin, who worked to solve any problems they faced living in the Chinese city. Yet this house, that's such an important part of Korean history, has not been preserved at all. Instead, it's home to a local resident. Likewise, all these historic places that show Ahn's movement in Harbin are not being well managed. The chief researcher of Korea Cultural Heritage Policy Research Institute agrees the historical sites are not being well preserved.
In order to manage our historical sites efficiently, a private sector foundation must be created that is composed of experts in the field. The government's role would be to support this foundation monetarily. This would improve the foundation's overall management.
In fact, historical sites in Harbin were mostly taken care of by Korean activists until the early 2000s. Government efforts only started when the public demanded they support the work of Koreans trying to preserve the sites. With the uncertainty in the air, it's hoped the government can cooperate with the private sector to preserve and effectively manage these historical sites that are so dear to Koreans around the world. Hong Yu, Arirang News, Harbin.
Now, the maverick CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, has reiterated his confidence that he's able to secure enough funding to take the firm private after a July meeting with a Saudi Arabian wealth fund. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So, Adam, Musk has been hinting at going private for quite a while now. Could we actually see it happen, though?
Well, Musk certainly seems confident himself that Tesla can end its 8-year run as a publicly traded company. In a blog post on Monday, he said Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund had purchased nearly 5% of Tesla's stock and that the fund approached him multiple times over the past 2 years about taking the electric car maker private. He added that he left a meeting at the end of last month with, quote, no question that a deal could be closed. The blog post comes about a week after Musk shocked investors with an announcement on Twitter that he was considering taking Tesla private at $420 per share. He also valued the firm at $72 billion. He didn't provide details on the funding, only saying it was secured. That tweet put Musk under scrutiny by federal securities regulators. They are looking into the accuracy of his tweet and whether it led to investors driving up the firm's shares by 11% on that day. If that is the case, then Musk could be at risk for securities fraud if his statement wasn't entirely true. Meanwhile, a number of investors are suing him for misleading the markets. Musk was seeking to clarify his tweet in Monday's blog, but there's still uncertainty surrounding his claim of what he called secured funding. As he wrote, he is still in talks with other investors concerning the go private transaction. The Saudi Arabian fund does have enough assets to complete the deal, but it is yet to comment on the CEO's statement. Tesla and the US Securities and Exchange Commission are also yet to issue a response. US Defense Secretary James Mattis has kicked off his first trip to South America since taking office. He arrived in Brazil on Monday and will visit 2 cities before moving on to Argentina, Colombia and Chile in the coming days. He told reporters traveling with him that the United States is looking to expand its partnerships with the nations of the region where it makes sense to do so. At least 300 people have been injured in northwestern Spain after a pier collapsed during an oceanside music concert. The incident occurred in the city of Vigo late Sunday night local time at the closing event of the 3-day festival. The wooden planks of the pier reportedly collapsed when a rapper told the crowd to jump, sending people down into the sea. Divers are looking to see if any more people are in the water, but no fatalities have been reported yet.
Good morning. It's forecast to be hotter than yesterday. Temperatures hovering in the mid to upper 30s across the nation. And Seoul will get up to 36 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju will be sweltering hot, while some eastern regions might see passing showers during the day. And tomorrow is a national holiday here in Korea, marking National Liberation Day, but the weather will remain hot and sunny. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have for now. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV. We'll have our next newscast coming up at noon as well. Korea time, that's with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.